Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batiste says, "Give me the rock." Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam, and now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Thursday, December 18th, 2025. It's my official duty to welcome you into episode 516 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Welcome to the Jardy house. I'm staring outside it. This time yesterday there was snow on the ground, but it's gone. We got a little mini heat wave here in mid-December. But I'm here with you on a Thursday. Like I said, the sun's shining. We had some interviews earlier this morning with Jake Diebler and Bruce Thornton. And we're going to go over a couple of quick takeaways from that as Ohio State gets ready here to go play North Carolina on Saturday in Atlanta in the CBS Sports Classic. As I mentioned on the last podcast, we'll be joined here in a moment on this episode by a special guest, Gary Parrish from CBS Sports. You hear me reference the Eye on College Basketball podcast all the time. Was kind enough to give me a good half an hour just a little bit ago for an interview here to preview this weekend's game and to, get some of his thoughts from sort of from a national perspective on Ohio State. I talk about it here every once in a while, but I'm often so focused on just what is happening with Ohio State that it's nice to get a bigger picture viewpoint on the Buckeyes. And so, I had a great conversation with Gary. I do apologize because Indy, our almost 1-year-old dog, decided to just start barking wildly for absolutely no reason in the middle of one of his answers. So apologies if you do hear some dog in the background. I guess maybe she just had her own opinions on this. I don't know, but yeah, we covered a lot of ground. I think you're really going to enjoy the interview, and I don't want to belabor this too long, but a couple of things we went over in interviews today. First of all, I raised the point at both to Jake Diebler and to Bruce Thornton that so through 10 games last year, Ohio State was 6-4 and had dealt with Aaron Bradshaw being suspended and being away from the team and then eventually coming back to the team. And then after 10 games, Meechie Johnson left the team, never to return. So it was interesting to me just thinking where this Ohio State season is compared to last year and just the lack of off-court turmoil. So we talked about those things. I'm going to be writing that here shortly for dispatch.com. And there's a lot of talk about Caleb Wilson. Ohio State recruited the heck out of Caleb out of high school and ran the race right up until the end. Ultimately, he committed to North Carolina and is having a monster season for the Tar Heels. And Ohio State will get a chance to see him in person here on Saturday. So we talked about that matchup and about his season and what they've seen from him. A couple little interesting notes from interviews. One thing, Jake Diebler was asked about in the West Virginia game, and he talked about what's been going on in the first half of games. And he said, as a generalization, he said, our biggest struggles have been offensively in the first half. He said, we've got to be better offensively. We've got to step up and make some shots too. We're a much better shooting team than we've shot recently, and that's part of it. The other thing we've had to evaluate is looking at lineups. There are a couple games where we were fatigued at the end of the first half, lost the last 3-4 minutes because of it. He said, some of it comes down to making and missing shots, but we can make sure we're not fatigued in the last couple of minutes. We can control our shot selection. I think we're good enough to control how we take care of the ball. Those things have been the biggest reasons. I think back to the West Virginia game and getting Tayson Chapman in for a couple of minutes in the middle of the half, and that didn't allow them to get Bruce Thornton off the court, and they still didn't really close that half very well. But I wonder if we're going to see, you could maybe see a little bit more of that in the first half of things and see if that has an impact on whether Ohio State can close halves better, have better overall first halves. Just one of the many things that we went over here earlier this morning. All right, so next thing, Jake Diebler was asked about some of the not being able to call timeouts late and the back and forth nature of that West Virginia game and the balance between trying to draw things up but also having to let your guys play sometimes. I thought this was an interesting answer. I didn't get a chance to ask a follow up on this, but I thought I'd be curious to see which possessions these were, but Diebler said there were 2 possessions specifically where we actually got to the second layer of the play and scored. And they're talking about in the guts of or the final minutes of regulation overtime in that double overtime game. He said, that's a great sign of growth in a high basketball IQ team where a team takes away your first look and you get to the next layer of the play design, you execute that, and you score on your second or third layer. That says a lot about your team. So there were a lot of like critical moments, like really high leverage possessions in that West Virginia game, like really too many to break down and analyze in any sort of meaningful way, I feel like, or at least from my end. But I thought that was some interesting insight into that. And to go back to something that Diebler said a moment ago, I think this is going to be, well, I don't think this will be something to keep an eye on as Ohio State goes into this game. So the Tar Heels are big. North Carolina is the tallest team in the nation, according to Ken Pom, average height. And the Tar Heels are really talented. They're 10-1. They're 22nd at Ken Pom. They're having a strong start to the season under Hubert Davis after having entered the season with him very firmly as like the face of the hot seat conversations, really. But the Tar Heels as a team, they shoot 32.7% from three. That's 205th nationally. And they are third in defensive 2-point field goal percentage. Teams only shoot 40.6% from two against the Tar Heels, and they certainly have size to think for that. Ohio State is fifth in 2-point field goal percentage offense. The Buckeyes make 63.1% of their twos. Ohio State is 123rd in 3-point field goal percentage. The Buckeyes are at 34.8%. And just for comparison, last year Ohio State was at 36.8%. That was 39th in the country. But looking at Ohio State, these last couple of games here, in high major games this season, so Ohio State was 7 of 23 from three against Notre Dame. That's 30.4%. Against Pitt, 7 of 24, 29.2%. Against Northwestern, 4 of 14, 28.6%. Against Illinois, 9 of 28, 32.1%. And against West Virginia, 4 of 21, 19%. So the Buckeyes are not shooting well from three against high major opponents. And I think that in order for this team to take down North Carolina, this is maybe my one statistical insight into the game. I think for Ohio State to win against the Tar Heels, the Buckeyes are going to have to make shots from the perimeter. I don't think there's any way around that. I think with North Carolina's size, that's going to affect what Ohio State can do around the rim at times. And I think in order for Ohio State to have a chance, and Ken Pom has this as a close game, the Buckeyes are projected to lose 78-75. But keep a close eye on whether or not the Buckeyes can actually make a couple of shots from the perimeter and get some things going from the three-point line in a way that they haven't really yet this season against high major teams. One other thing to bring up, Bruce Thornton did talk about, he had his jersey retired at his high school on Tuesday, and really at the risk of like turning everything into like the Bruce Thornton story, like there's just a lot going on with him at this moment. And I feel like the season he's having, certainly the hitting the game-winning shot against West Virginia, been a big week for Bruce. But I did ask him about, he hasn't played well in Atlanta. You look at these, the Buckeyes this will be the third time that he'll play in his home city, essentially. Last year was the Auburn game, 91-53. Bruce Thornton had 3 points on one made three-pointer. He took 7 shots. The Tigers just completely took him out of the game. He was a non-factor. And then you go back to the CBS Sports Classic there 2 years ago. Ohio State played UCLA and gutted out a 67-60 win. Ohio State as a team, 1 of 15 from three. The only three-pointer was a very, very late Jamison Battle three that prevented Ohio State from snapping its streak of like 9 million consecutive games with a made three-pointer. But Bruce had 13 in that game. He's 4 of 10 from the floor, or from two, and 0 of 5 from three. So 4 of 15. He was 5 of 6 from the line. He pulled down 7 rebounds, had 4 assists, but he hasn't really played like a super solid game back in his home city. Interested to see what that looks like this weekend. He talked about not putting as much pressure on himself and playing more within himself. But another thing to look at here is Ohio State gets ready to play the Tar Heels. So we're going to get to Gary Parrish here in just a second. Before we do, I want to remind you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars. And please consider telling a friend. Thanks to everyone who's taking the time to do all those things. So now, without further ado, Gary Parrish. All right, everyone. So Ohio State will play North Carolina here on Saturday in Atlanta as part of the annual CBS Sports Classic. And longtime listeners of the podcast know it's become tradition to have one of the two members of the CBS Ion College Basketball podcast to preview the Buckeyes as they play in the event. And unfortunately for Gary Parrish, he drew the short straw this year. So his misfortune is our gain. I'm thrilled to have one of the most knowledgeable college basketball reporters with us here for a few minutes to preview this weekend's event. So, GP, thanks so much for coming on. How's your day going?
My day's going fine, and I don't know if it's a short stick or a long stick, but I'm happy to have pulled it because it's nice to be here with you.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you fitting me in. I mean, people on my podcast know I cite you guys all the time and constantly point people in your direction. You guys do an unbelievable job. And so anytime I get the chance to catch up with either of you and talk some ball, and especially for an event like this, it's good opportunity, good times. And so I appreciate you giving me some time.
It's my pleasure, man. How you been? You been good?
Yeah, it's been an interesting season for Ohio State, and it's been as we were just talking about before we started recording, it's kind of nice. They had a week off, which means I had a little bit of a couple of days off, get some Christmas shopping done, and get some things done around the house. So it's a good time in the calendar to be a beat writer. So
you get the last minute Christmas, get the last minute holiday shopping knocked out.
I'm working on it. I'm still not there. You'll like this story real quick. I had this awesome present for my wife, this like customized T-shirt of our dog that I had ordered online, and like ordered it in like November, like mid-November, like plenty of times. It'd be like the Keystone Christmas present, and then it like got stuck in shipping for a while. I'm tracking it, and then finally I get a message one day that says that the post office has seized the package due to counterfeit postage, and it will not be delivered.
Oh no!
So
it's. So now I hope you got a backup plan. Well,
the backup plan was show her the shirt and say, "Do I get points for the effort here? Because this is not coming, and I don't have a great fallback here." So counterfeit postage.
If counterfeit postage is a new one on me. People always say it is the thought that counts, and so now we get to see if your wife actually subscribes to that.
I will report back on the 20th. Well, maybe the 25th. We'll say that.
There you go.
I'll let you know. So anyway, wanted to get some thoughts from you here on Ohio State as they come into this game. Now the Buckeyes have been kind of like just outside like the national picture for most of the year, and 8-2, coming off a double overtime win against West Virginia. What have you made of Ohio State so far this year?
Well, I like the way you framed that because it's accurate. They have been a little bit off of the national radar, and this is where I will forever argue with people when they say things like national rankings don't matter, the AP poll doesn't matter, because they all matter immensely. Because if Ohio State had a number next to its name, everything that Bruce Thornton has been doing would be much more talked about, discussed. He's having an All-American level season and could very reasonably be on any All-American team right now, but might not be, because when people start looking at stuff like that, the first thing they do is grab the AP poll, go through the 25 teams that are there, and try to find the best players. I'm not saying you can't be an All-American from an unranked team. Obviously you can, but it is harder to do. So right now, top 40 at KenPom, 8-2. You'd love to have the Pittsburgh loss back, but nothing you can do about that now. Still no big wins, top 50 wins. Some of this is the byproduct of the schedule. I think when I looked it up in advance of talking to you, because I knew we'd probably get into some of this stuff, this time last year, Ohio State had already played, I believe, 3 top 20 KenPom teams. Right now, they haven't played a top they played 1 top 20 KenPom team and only 1 top 50, and they've got 0 wins. So the schedule was a little lighter this non-league, perhaps by design. You probably have a better idea for that than I. But there's like the best thing you could say about Ohio State right now is they haven't messed anything up. Like whatever the goals are, they haven't banged up their resume in any sort of meaningful way that they can't still get where they're trying to get to. But, you know, there are teams out there at the top of the rankings who already have big signature victories. Right. And Ohio State's still looking for their first one. The good news is you got an opportunity to get it on Saturday.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up about like the resume and not really like necessarily anything holding them back too much. Like I was just looking at, there's last year they were 6-4 at this point. This year they're 8-2. But like you said, the schedule has been different. The quality of opponent has been different to this point. And I look at like I've been talking a lot with my readers, my listeners about that loss that they have at Pitt, where the Panthers are really, I think they're 6-6 right now. Like that's a quad 3 loss that's just gonna, I think, hold them down a bit like all year. How much does that impact? I feel like you guys do a great job talking about this on the podcast, that like a loss in November still is going to hurt you in March. Like how big is one loss like that Pitt loss for Ohio State when they have more opportunities ahead of them, but like you said, they don't have these signature wins yet?
Well, you just can't shake it. It'll be there forever. Like until the selection committee has a bracket put together, every time they talk about Ohio State, they're going to click on a screen and that's going to stand out.
Yeah.
So what you hope is that you don't have more of them, that you don't have a crooked number in that column, the quad 3 loss column, by the time they're done with this thing, because those things, the selection committee tells us every year, where a game is played matters. But when a game is played doesn't matter that much. You can beat somebody or lose to somebody on February 27th or on November 4th, and we are going to account for that pretty similarly. So to answer your question directly, that's going to be a problem for the at-large resume from this point forward. It's going to be a problem for AT voters from this point forward. Most top 10, 15, 20, 25 teams in the country at this point in the season have been able to avoid losses like that Ohio State took one. And I know that it was on the road and by a point, but it's going to stand out on the resume and be a problem through Selection Sunday.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, when I looked at their resume last year, and even as they got down to the end of the season and they played themselves off the bubble, but the reason they were even on the bubble last year to begin with is because they did have some of those early season top 20 wins, like you had mentioned. And so the thing that kept Ohio State going until eventually the losses piled up last year was that they didn't have a bad loss. They just ultimately had too many of them. And I think that makes this year a little bit different and puts a little bit more, I don't know if emphasis is the right word, but like it does kind of up the stakes a little bit for Ohio State, I feel like, going into this weekend, because they, not that it cancels out a bad loss, but a win on Saturday I feel like have a significant impact on the resume.
Well, for sure. And, cancel out is, like you acknowledge, probably not the exact way to put it, but more or less, like the sentiment's right. You can offset bad stuff with good stuff. And the other thing you can root for if you're an Ohio State fan is, like, Pitt is not very good, but they do play an ACC schedule, and that means ACC teams, the very good ones, are going to have to go there. And so what you hope is that you'll never be able to undo what happened to you at the end of November at Pitt, but maybe you can provide context by saying someday, well, North Carolina lost at Pitt too, or Duke lost at Pitt too, or Virginia lost at Pitt too. You would like to see the Panthers knock out somebody else of quality at home, because then it makes your loss not look so bad. It just makes it look like something else somebody else did. So
it's funny, as you're talking, I just was pulling up Pitt on KenPom, and boy, it does not look good for Pitt the rest of the season. Pitt is projected to beat Florida State at home on March 4th, and there's not another win on the resume at this point. So that's going to be a little bit rough.
Yeah, but, there's no way to spin it good. This is never going to be a good loss. It's always going to be a bad loss. You're just trying to make it as good of a bad loss as it can be.
Right.
And perhaps if they upset, say, any of the schools I've already named, or like a Louisville, at the Peterson Event Center, then again, if you're Ohio State, you can say, yeah, we lost to Pitt. That's bad, but it was a long time ago, and other good teams, even top 25 teams, lost there, same as us.
Right. So you mentioned Bruce Thornton a moment ago, and I wanted to get some thoughts from you on the season that he's been putting together. Because like you said, if Ohio State was ranked, I feel like it would be a much different conversation. But it seems like right now, I feel like I can't write enough about him because he keeps doing like crazy things, and he's playing at such a high level. From your perspective, like what has like his season looked like to this point to you, and what is it? I guess legacy is too big of a phrase to throw out right now because we still have a lot of basketball left this season, but like for him to be a 4-year guy at one school who is a 4-year captain, like all that kind of stuff, like what has it been like from your viewpoint, just like the Bruce Thornton experience at Ohio State?
Well, there hasn't been enough team success to, elevate it to a real big national story.
Yeah.
But when you drill down on him specifically, I mean, you would know the numbers better than I, but I imagine he's going to rank pretty high on Ohio State's all-time scoring list. And it probably then stays there for a long time because in this era of college basketball, how often are you going to see somebody average double figures in points for 30-plus games for 4 straight years,
right,
at the same school? I don't think that's going to happen a lot going forward because
right,
of the transfer portal, because of revenue sharing, because of NIL. So he has had an incredible college career that only lacks team success to really make it resonate nationally. And right now, he's better than ever. And if Ohio State were ranked 4th in the country, you would have people suggesting this is the biggest threat to Cameron Boozer for National Player of the Year because he would be averaging then 21.8 points, 5 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 1.3 steals for a team that, in our hypothetical, is ranked top 5 in the country, shooting 60% from the field and 50% from 3. 60% for the field is like, that's a Cameron Boozer number. That's a big man number. To be
right,
6'2", and be shooting 60% from the field at a Big Ten program is pretty outlandish. So he's been great. And, the stage that CBS will provide him on Saturday might, be an opportunity for him to really launch himself into that National Player of the Year conversation, because I promise you there are millions of college basketball fans who will have that on Saturday and have no idea right now that a little guard named Bruce Thornton at Ohio State is actually having one of the best seasons in the sport, certainly on the offensive end. Like his offensive rating and a lot of the metrics is like top 5 in the country, top 10 in the country, arguably the best in the country, but people just are not aware of it because most basketball fans pay attention to the ranked teams that are just thrust into the apps on their phones that they default to, and stuff that happens outside of that. Sometimes, often, it just happens almost in the dark.
Yeah. It's been a big week for him too. I wrote about this late last week, and we actually just had interviews with him earlier today. But he had his high school jersey retired. He's the first player in his high school history to have his jersey retired. So it's been and he's from the Atlanta area. So I'm curious to see. This will be his 3rd time playing in Atlanta. He's not put up good numbers there. Coming back home and playing in front of the hometown crowd. And I asked him about that today, and he said it's just been a case of maybe making a little bit too much of the moment in the past. And he said he feels like he's mentally in a better place and more better equipped to play better in his hometown. So one of the things I'm interested to see here this weekend, when you do look at like the rest of the Ohio State roster, like what has stood out to you about like anybody else on the team that catches your attention or that has been impactful in your eyes, I guess, to this point, or guys you're taking note of?
Well, I mean, John Mobley is obviously somebody that we expected to have a role on this team. He is a double-digit scorer back for his sophomore season, and hasn't really taken a jump. I mean, you see it more up close than I do. Hasn't taken the statistical jump, at least, that you would hope somebody might make from a freshman to sophomore season. But anytime you've got somebody who started 22 times last season as a freshman for a team that, take a few losses here, flip them into wins, very reasonably could have been in the NCAA tournament. When you got that guy back averaging nearly 14 points per game, that's a solid piece. So if Thornton can be the star and Mobley can, be his best sidekick, perhaps that's the recipe, the formula for getting Ohio State back into the field of 68.
And it's obviously going to be like an interesting type of matchup, given that Carolina brings so much size and Ohio State has more size than it has in the past, but I think is a little bit more guard dominant maybe than North Carolina. Switching to the Tar Heels for just a little bit, but like what What is it about that North Carolina front court, aside from really good players, that has really stood out to you?
Well, that's it. It starts right there. Caleb Wilson wasn't talked about heading into the season as a part of the Big Three freshman conversation because that conversation was largely tied to NBA mock drafts. And if you were talking about it from that perspective, the Big Three was always going to be Darren Peterson at Kansas, A.J. DeBonsa at BYU, and Cameron Boozer at Duke, because Caleb Wilson, awesome as he was in high school, heralded as he was, is not considered that type of NBA prospect necessarily. But as a college basketball player, he is as impactful as just about any of them. 19.5 points, 10.4 rebounds. And then one game after another, you never know whether he's even going to be the best front court player on the team because Henry Vasar has been terrific as well. So there's so much talent in college basketball right now. There are other great front courts in America, but if you were looking at a starting 4, starting 5, you're going to have a hard time finding something more dominant, more impactful, more overwhelming than the 4-5 combo of Wilson and Vasar at North Carolina.
When you look at Ohio State, and I think back to the last, I guess when Jake Diebler was the interim coach at Ohio State, and one of the things that I enjoyed hearing on your podcast, you would point out that Diebler had teams were getting Dieblered when Ohio State was winning here or winning there. He's 10 games into year 2. What were your thoughts at the time? I think you talked at the time about you liked the hire because someone showed them something that nobody really expected. What did you make of the hire, and what do you think about the job that he's done there so far?
I was in favor of the hire. I was intrigued by it. And it was clear to me that he was impressive in person because on the day you decide to move on and promote him to interim, I don't think they believed Jake Diebler was going to be their next full-time head coach.
Right.
But he did enough as an interim and did enough in terms of getting key players like Bruce Thornton to commit to coming back that I thought in that moment that was the smartest thing Ohio State could do. So I approved of what they did. But obviously last season, the first full season in charge didn't go as well as it needed to go. 10th place finish in the conference. That's not where Ohio State should be. Jake would tell you that before I would. And so I do think this is an important season because interim coaches who get full-time gigs, one of the things I've picked up on, whether this is on the football side or basketball side, is that they are typically given a shorter leash, if you will. Athletic directors, school presidents, and chancellors, if a guy who was once your interim is now your full-time coach and it's not going brilliantly, they start to second-guess themselves a little more quicker than they otherwise would have. Did we get caught up in the moment of a nice 11-game stretch to end the season that didn't really matter anyway? And did that lead us to hiring somebody we wouldn't have otherwise hired? Those questions, it happened to a Wichita State coach a few years ago. It happened to a Mississippi State football coach who was promoted after Mike Leach died. So this is an important year for Jake, not because I believe that if it doesn't go well, that could be it. But what history does show us is that when you are the unknown, mostly anonymous assistant who then gets the interim job and is really only expected to take it to the finish line of that season, but then you do well enough to where the school feels like they should just hand you the job full time, if it doesn't get off to a back at that very quickly. And that's why I do believe this is an important season for Jake, because you don't want to do back-to-back missing the NCAA tournament at a place like Ohio State, because even if you get next season, then you're probably the face of those hot seat columns that get written every October.
Right. And that leads me into the next thing I wanted to get your just general thoughts on, which is just that, on the broader college basketball stage, where do you see Ohio State fitting in? Where is Ohio State viewed nationally as a basketball program?
Well, it's I think harder to say now than it would have been just a few years ago, because suddenly revenue sharing is working differently at different places. Nobody truly understands what NIL is supposed to look like or will look like. And so in a vacuum, if we were back where we were just, say, a year ago or 2 years ago, I would tell you Ohio State should be one of the best jobs in the country because of all of the resources available at the Ohio State University. But what I gather is that so much money has been eaten up by football that things can be a little challenging for the basketball side of things. Like, I would be interested in knowing where is Ohio State's men's basketball budget relative to other Big Ten basketball budgets, relative to other big brands that are expected to win conference championships at the power conference level. Because I do think those are the expectations of Ohio State, but I also know that football is by far the biggest thing and most important thing there, as it should be. But when you talk to some of these basketball coaches at quote-unquote football schools, they're a little uncertain of how this is going to go for them, because the bigger the football thing gets, by definition, on some level, the smaller the basketball thing can get. Like, particularly when it comes to revenue sharing, all of this is supposed to be a zero-sum thing. Like, you have X amount of dollars, and you can put some of it over here and some of it over there, but every penny you put here is a penny that can't go there. And I'm not talking about Jake specifically, but I can just tell you, I have talked to basketball coaches who work at some of the biggest brands that possess huge football operations, and they are finding this existence more difficult than it used to be because there is only so much money to be divvied up, and a lot of it is going in what they believe is the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dichotomy because it's proving to get harder it's proving to be harder and harder, I feel like, at a school like Ohio State. And I think what some of the frustration that maybe some of the fans feel these days is, like, right now, I mean, they look and see what Dusty May's doing at Michigan, and they see, what Nate Oates is doing in Alabama. And, like, there are some examples of where they're clearly investing in both at a high level. And I do think that there is a level of frustration with the Ohio State fan base at the moment of, like, how much, or like, where should this program be? And it's probably not as high as we think. So why is it not getting where it needs to be? And it's an interesting time, I feel like, for the program, given the landscape of the sport.
So I think at those programs you mentioned, Alabama, Michigan, one of the things they did, and that's why it's hard to know how this is going to go going forward, is a lot of these schools, Kentucky is a great example, Kansas is an example, Texas Tech, an obvious example. They shoved big NIL deals through before July 1st so that they weren't subject to any sort of approval from an oversight body. So like right now, Kentucky reportedly has a basketball roster worth $22 million. Right. In theory, going forward, that is not going to be allowed. Now, who knows if it will be, if it'll hold up in court, if people will just recklessly break the rules and say to hell with it. That last is what I think is probably closer to the truth.
I agree.
The rule breaking is going to come back in a pretty dramatic way. But if everybody is playing by the rules, as the rules are currently constructed, there was supposed to be a very defined amount of rev share money each athletic department has, and NIL deals have to be legitimate and approved by oversight committees. And the type of NIL deals that all of these schools push through before July 1st, by definition, none of them, and I mean none of them, should be allowed. Like JT Toppin re-signed with Texas Tech for what amounts to like a $4 million NIL deal. That should not be allowed. JT Toppin is not worth $4 million in NIL to any company on this planet. He is worth that as a basketball player, but the rules are not supposed to allow for that. So what's going to be interesting going forward is if every NIL deal has to be quote-unquote legitimate, and you only have a defined amount of rev share money to spend per athletic department, how that money gets divvied up is going to determine the answer to the question you're asking, which is, what is this program supposed to be? Because I think Indiana is a great place to look right now. The Indiana basketball job with these rules in place in a different time is probably the best basketball job in the Big Ten because they would take most money, or at least lots of money, an unusual percentage of money, and shove it to men's basketball at the expense of football, because who cares about football? This is Indiana basketball.
Right.
But now what do you do if you're Darren DeVries? Because they're going to give Curt Cignetti everything he needs to keep trying to do what he's doing. And on some level, that has to come at the expense of the basketball program. So as crazy as this sounds, I've had multiple basketball coaches share this sentiment with me this season. GP, it's crazy because I work at this school. I'm friends with that guy. I want this to be great. We bring in recruits and take them to football games to try to show them how awesome of a place this is. But then, you know what? I need my football team to lose, because I don't need my football coach to be asking or be in a position to ask for more money and more things, because that's coming straight out of my budget if they have to give him more. So the worst thing that could happen to the Indiana coach is what's happening to the Indiana football program right now, in theory. And that's going to be complicated for a lot of athletic departments and universities to figure out.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, too, the impact at Indiana if they are able to sustain consistent internet access there. And if that could, if that has an impact on things. For anybody that isn't aware, that's kind of an ongoing bit on the CBS podcast about whether Indiana basketball fans have internet.
Well, that joke started, they would just, like, Indiana fans were wild. Like, anything that wasn't a compliment at IU just had your Twitter mentions all messed up. And at one point, when they were going through it a little bit under Mike Woodson and things weren't going so well, I'm on, like, live on the podcast talking to Norlander, and I'm like, yeah, you know, so Indiana's now lost 3 of 4. This was a 20-point loss at home. And then and I'm totally deadpan, and I'm like, when you combine it with what's going on up there in the Bloomington area, it's just, man, these are tough times. And Orlando's like, what's going on in the Bloomington area? I was like, well, they got internet problems up there. Like the whole state is like, the internet's down. It's been down for weeks. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because Indiana fans, they used to tweet me every day to tell me how stupid I am, not ranking Indiana here, not thinking Indiana's that. But I haven't heard from them in like a month. So I was just assuming the internet must be dead. So now every time Indiana loses a game it's not supposed to lose, somebody is tweeting, is the internet down in Bloomington? Because they get real quiet around those parts those times. So it's a funny little bit that's probably carried on a few more years longer than it should have. I actually wouldn't mind seeing Indiana return to something of national relevance. That fan base, they do care deeply, and it's been bad for them for a while. I don't root against people, so if Darren can get it back to a good place, that'll be fun. But to circle back to our point about the conversation, I think there are people. Never before have football and basketball at some universities been pitted against each other the way they are right now. Because when it comes to rev share, there's only so much money available. And I've had athletic directors. I know one athletic director told me they did it like this. Said they asked their football coach, men's basketball coach, and women's basketball coach. Didn't even talk to the other coaches on campus about anything. Just said, I want to start with you three. We have $20.5 million to divvy up amongst every athletic department program we have. 20.5. Football coach, will you write down on a piece of paper what you think you need to compete for a conference championship? Men's basketball coach, do the same thing. Women's basketball coach, do the same thing. When you get done, hand me the pieces of paper. They hand over the pieces of paper. Athletic director opens up the piece of paper, adds it up, and says, hey, this is $33 million. I told you we have 20.5, and all of you want more than I know I can give you. So now let's try to figure this out. That is a conversation. Some version of that has happened on every campus at the power conference level in America, and the tension that it brings to these relationships is, I'm told, sometimes a very real thing.
Yeah. Well, last thing for you here, and then I know you're on your way to go catch a flight. I don't want to take up your entire transit. I'm sure you enjoy, maybe a few moments of peace here and there. But for
I have made this drive back. I've made this drive out of Midtown Manhattan to the airport out of New York City. It's a cool drive because you're getting to still see New York City, and that's a nice visual for people. But trust me, I've seen this it feels like 5 billion times. So I'm missing nothing. I promise you.
You sound like Mick Cronin.
Yes. I'm not offended by seeing the Statue of Liberty over and over again, like Mick Cronin is. But yes, I have seen the Statue of Liberty more times than anybody needs to.
But the last one here, but before I let you go and enjoy all the sights and all that. But just for Ohio State fans that will be making the trip down there, that will be the first game of the day. Obviously, is going to be a pretty entertaining college basketball game. I know there's gonna be a lot of focus there on Kentucky, St. John's, and Rick Pitino, Big Blue Nation. Like, what are you excited about in that game? Like, what? I know I saw like Jaden Quaintance might play, and that was another guy Ohio State recruited pretty heavily. But like, there's a lot of intrigue in that game too. Just in general, like, what are you most intrigued about in that matchup?
Yeah, with all due respect to both Ohio State and North Carolina, the bigger of the two matchups is the Kentucky-St. John's game, in part because it's Rick Pitino against his old school, Rick Pitino against his former player, Rick Pitino, the man who coached Kentucky to the 96 championship, against Mark Pope, the man who was the captain on that championship team. So that's going to be fun no matter what. But then, they're both still ranked and both okay. But Kentucky or maybe Kentucky's not ranked right now. I have them in my top 25 and when I don't think they're in the AP poll. But both of those teams, relative to preseason expectations, even if they haven't been, devastatingly bad, they have been disappointing. I mean, embarrassingly at this point, I had St. John's preseason number 1. It now looks like the roster just isn't going to fit together the way that Rick Pitino tried to tell everybody it would fit together back in the offseason. I fell for his bluster once again. But both of these teams really need a victory badly because whichever one loses, their fan base is going to be asking big questions. Hold up. We were preseason top 5 at St. John's, and we have 4 losses before Christmas. How did this happen? Or if it's Kentucky, hold up. We spent $22 million on a basketball team, the most expensive basketball team in the history of the sport, and we have 5 losses before Christmas. One of those things is going to be true on Saturday afternoon. Either St. John's is going to have 4 losses before Christmas or Kentucky is going to have 5, and neither one are okay. So I can already tell you the biggest story coming out of the CBS Sports Classic, barring a surprise, will be the loser of the first game.
For sure. Well, like I said at the beginning of this, I always appreciate getting to catch up with you. Both you and Norlander have been so kind to me over the years as I've been on this beat, and I just appreciate any chance I get to catch up with you guys and whenever you're willing to come on and talk about Ohio State, even when the Buckeyes have kind of consistently in these last 11 years been a little bit off the radar. I've appreciated you guys always chiming in and jumping on and giving me some of your time. So looking forward to seeing you down there this weekend. But thank you again so much for everything and for coming on today.
It is my pleasure. Don't ever hesitate to ask. I'm a former beat writer myself, so I know the life you're living. Always great to talk to you. I can't wait to see you in Atlanta.
All right, so big thanks once again to GP for coming on the show and for giving me some of his time. Like I mentioned on there, both he and Norlander have been just nothing but kind to me since starting on this job. I mean, I know I've talked about it over the years, but when I started covering Ohio State men's basketball for the Dispatch, one of the first things that I did was I just sought out any college basketball podcasts that I could find so I could start understanding more the bigger picture and where Ohio State fits into it and what's happening outside of Columbus, what's happening outside of the Big Ten. And there are certainly other podcasts that I enjoy listening to that I have listened to, some that no longer exist, but those guys have been a constant in my ears now for more than a decade. And I just think they provide an awesome entertaining product. They're incredibly well-sourced and knowledgeable. And they're super nice. Like every time I've gotten to see them at an arena or at a game or whatever, they've always been nothing but kind to me. And so that stuff is always genuinely appreciated. And if for some reason you've gotten this far in the podcast and you don't know about the Eye on College Basketball podcast, certainly go give them a listen. It's a good time. And eventually you'll pick up on all the inside jokes that have been going on now for, well, in some cases, 10, 11 years. So time flies. So I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm heading to Atlanta on Friday. Got quite a few things to write between now and then, but we'll have full coverage for you on the ground in Atlanta. Really excited to see how this one shakes out. And then I will podcast for you Saturday evening, and the fingers crossed hope is to have it out to you either Saturday night or early Sunday morning. But look for a podcast this weekend from Atlanta. So as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thank you again for listening, and thanks to Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, for stitching this all together. I will be back with you this weekend. So until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.